Welcome, everyone, to the Herbert C. Kelman Seminar on International Conflict. We are so happy that you are here today to join us. And I know there are people from all over the world. So to some of you, it's good morning, to some good night. But all I want to communicate here at this moment is thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day or night to join us for this wonderful presentation by Anne Pratt, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. I just want to remind you that this seminar is co-sponsored by the Program on Negotiation and the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs, both at Harvard. And my name is Donna Hicks, and I'm the chair of this seminar. Wanted to let you know a little bit about the format. We will have Anne do her presentation after I introduce her. And she'll give a talk for about 35 to 40 minutes, after which we would like to invite you to put questions in the Q&A function. And I'll go through them and present those questions to Anne, and we'll just do that until the end of the seminar. Nicole Bryant, the managing director of the Program on Negotiation, she's going to come on for a minute and just give you some update you on what's coming up in the next month or so with Program on Negotiation. So we are recording this. If by any chance you want to hear it again, or you want to tell your friends who might have missed this opportunity to hear Anne today, you can go on the Program on Negotiation website and click on events, and you'll see Anne's presentation there. And I also want to thank Diane Long and Lindsay. Oops, sorry, Lindsay, I forgot your name. For helping us with this. Nicole Bryant is also here with us, and a big thanks to the three of them for making this seminar possible. I want to say that Anne Pratt is quite a remarkable woman in so many ways. She is the co-founder of the global Mandela Leadership Movement for Change. She's worked with Mandela, worked with the board. She also was here as a fellow, both at the Harvard Advanced Leadership Initiative and the Harvard Center for African Studies. So she's no stranger to us here at Harvard. She was a crazy successful businesswoman in South Africa. She worked all over, and she worked, as I said, with the board of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. In addition to working with Mandela, she's the author of the upcoming book, Mandela's Leadership Blueprint: What the World Needs Now. She, as I said, she co-founded the Global Mandela Leadership Movement for Change, which has more than 100 courageous champions of change worldwide. She also hosts a podcast, Leading Boldly into the Future. So, Anne, we're thrilled to have you here. I'm going to just, do you want me on? I know there was some talk about, did you want me to stay on with you, or do you want me to just give you this? I think I better give you the screen because you're going to show videos and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Donna.
All right, Anne, there you go. Turning it over to you.
Thank you. Well, it's a great honor, and it's always very heartwarming for me to be back with friends and colleagues and allies from Harvard and around the world, and wonderful to see all these people joining from different parts of the world. So really, I want to begin by saying hello to my fellow human being. Dumela, Lagai, Habari, Hamosi, Bon dia, bonjour, good day. And up front, I really want to say today, this is about you. It's a celebration of you. I have a strong belief and faith in you, and I have a belief in your ability, your courage, your purpose, and your passion to do the necessary to meet this big global moment in time. I think that when we talk about celebrations and, excuse me, coming from and growing up and living in South Africa, celebrations always come with song and dance. And for those of you who remember the famous hit song Jerusalem, which took the world by storm during the COVID pandemic, I wanted to share this video, which is really about how we celebrate in Africa and of course, how we celebrate in many parts of the world.
Jerusalem, ikhaya lami, ilondoloze, uhambe nami, zungangishilana. Jerusalem, ikhaya lami, ilondoloze, uhambe nami, zungangishilana.
So 3 things I'd love to share with you today. The first is, where are we in the world? The second is a revolutionary new way to think, act, and lead. Sorry. And that is based on the way that I learned growing up and living through South Africa's miracle transformation and Nelson Mandela way. And the third thing is very important. It's about, what role can you play? What is your call to action? Before we begin, I'd like us to just take a moment to close our eyes, take 3 deep breaths, bring us into the present moment, and breathe from the navel. And while you're doing that, just think about the kind of world, the ideal world. If you could wave this magic wand, what kind of world would you love to be living in? So if you close your eyes for a moment, take those 3 deep breaths, breathe from the navel, feel the oxygen coming up through your lungs, filling every living cell in your body with that gift of life, and imagine the ideal world. What would that be? And for those of you that have some of those thoughts already, if you'd love to share it in the chat, it would be wonderful to read your thoughts, hear about your perspective, and what kind of world do you imagine? What kind of world would you like to be part of? So please share that in the chat as well. And later, I'm going to ask Donna to share some of those thoughts with us. If we start with the first thing, let's look at the world today. There are 3 lots of staggering statistics I'd like to share with you. The first is the Global Peace Institute, the index measured in 2024. It's an Institute of Economics and Peace headquartered in Sydney and New York. And it's not surprising in a way that 2024, the world is at a crossroads. I know so many of you work in the area of litigation, arbitration, and mediation. And you know, your business is conflict resolution, and peace is your end game. And if we look at these statistics, the Global Peace Index shares with us that unless there is some concerted effort and a radical new way of dealing with conflict in the world, there is a huge risk that these conflicts will escalate and rise. And here are some of the statistics they shared. We currently have 56 conflicts going on in the world. That's the most since World War II. The second is that there are 92 nations who are engaged in conflict outside of their borders. That is the most since this index was first created in 2007. There are 110 million people displaced as a result of these conflicts and complexities in the world. And around 16 nations have already hosted around 500,000 refugees displaced by war and conflict. Economically, 2023, they estimated that these conflicts in our world today are costing the global economy $19.1 trillion, and that is 13.5% of gross domestic product. The second statistic is based on the work and theory developed by Robert Keegan. Professor Robert Keegan is a retired professor from the Harvard School of Education. He developed a theory called adult development theory, which talks about how we can develop as we mature over our lifetimes. And what Keegan found, well, first of all, he identified 5 stages of development. But what he found is that most of the world's population are stuck at level 3, which is what he called a socialized mindset. 58% of people live within a socialized mindset. And these are people who draw their identity from their tribe. They follow the rules of the tribe, and they don't have an independent view in terms of assessing the tribe objectively. That is their identity. That's what defines the rules, and the leader of that tribe, whether it be a political party, an organization, a community they belong to, a religion, that is what determines their sense of self and how they feel about themselves in the world. Keegan also found that people at level 4, which is what he calls a self-authored mind, these are people who are able to step outside the tribe and they have a huge pride in their tribe, but they're able to take an objective view, looking from the outside in. And the 5th level of development, Keegan calls the self-transformed mind. In fact, he referenced Nelson Mandela as a person who had a self-transformed mind. These are people who hold many identities. They embrace paradox. They embrace the complexities in life. And their sense of identity is not built on one tribe. It's their multiple identities in terms of the different types of tribes we have across our humanity in the world. And I think these statistics really give us a clue around how did we get to where we are today? And what is the level of thinking that we need to develop in order for people to step outside this tribal thinking, to take an objective view, and to be able to hold these complexities and paradoxes in the world. And the 3rd statistic, which is quite revealing around the current state of leadership within the corporate sector, is a 2022 Global Leadership Confidence Index done by Odgers and Bernstein, the search firm, and the research firm Forrester, where they did a poll around corporate executives, 1,100 corporate executives around the world in multiple sectors. And what they found is that 42% of executives have a confidence in their top leaders' ability to meet this moment and lead. 44% of them felt that their top leadership had performed poorly or fairly in the previous year. And of course, 2022, they were really assessing their top leaders' ability to innovate, adapt, and transform during the global pandemic. So what these statistics show is that we're truly living in a pivotal global moment, what I like to call a Mandela moment, a twin pillar moment of despair and hope. And in these complexities and existential challenges we face in the world, yes, we're in a world with heightened conflict. We're in a world facing these existential threats of climate. The US right now is still trying to deal with Hurricane Helene, which has been viewed to be the worst hurricane in the last 50 years. We're dealing with AI and this technology revolution. And, what is the future of humanity and the future of work in this new and complex world? And then, of course, we're dealing with, a pending nuclear war. And some people even feel perhaps a third world war. So we're in this pivotal moment. It's a twin pillar moment of despair and hope. What I want to share with you is that growing up in an apartheid South Africa and living through the incredible oppression of a brutal apartheid government, but living through the miracle transformation of a new democratic South Africa, I have 3 short stories that I want to share that helped me discover that there is a radical new way to think, act, and lead. The first begins when I was around 5 years of age. My late mother worked in Black medical education. She taught at one of the biggest teaching hospitals, Black hospitals in the Southern Hemisphere, King Edward. And one night she came home quite late from work, but living in this anti-apartheid activist family, Our family were followed by state police for about 8 years. And each night I remember seeing the policeman at the end of our driveway. And tonight was particularly difficult for me. I was young. But I remember looking out the window and seeing his silhouette. He was standing outside at the edge of the driveway under the street lamp. I could see his helmet under the light. I could see the gun on his hip. And I could hear his feet, his boots crunching on our gravel driveway. And I remember feeling an incredible fear and wishing that my mother would be home soon. Fortunately, I soon after that fell asleep. I think it was the anxiety and very, very excited to see my mother the next morning. But as a young child, if I think back to that moment, I still feel that fear in my body and that feeling of oppression, which was not only at the end of our driveway, but it was across the depth and breadth of South Africa. It was felt everywhere. If we fast forward a couple of years, I was around 7, and my mother worked pro bono in a rural mission hospital in KwaZulu-Natal called Inutu. Inutu became world famous, actually. It was run by a British husband and wife medical doctor team, Doctors Anthony and Maggie Barker. They were British. And we went up on Christmas holiday, and it was an incredible community. And what I realized as a young child, that this was much more than a hospital. You know, Anthony was like the chief executive, Maggie was like the chief operating officer. Weekend entertainment was playing baseball with a very old dented bat and a brown threadbare ball. And it was competitive. And I remember being at the end, you know, batting as the last member of our team and hitting that home run and, you know, feeling very determined and competitive and very excited when we won. But what was more interesting to me was, yes, there was this level of competition, but at the end of the game, we all got together and celebrated. And it was how Anthony and Maggie invited the community in. They viewed the people of the community as their family, and the people of the community played baseball, the patients who were about to be discharged, and the medical staff who were off duty. And you know, as a young child, there was this incredible sense of multiracial and multicultural harmony, which was very different to what was going on in the streets of South Africa during the late 1960s. And that was really my first childhood experience of Ubuntu, this incredible interconnectedness of humanity, the sense that we're in this together. And as we say in Africa, it takes a village. The third brief want to share is that, you know, as a young child sitting around the dinner table, a lot of the conversation was around the politics of the day. And I remember as a child praying very hard that Mandela would be released and that one day I would get to meet him. Fast forward to 2003, Women's Day in South Africa. A friend of mine, Totsi Mamela, who later became my business partner in our executive search firm, invited me to the Johannesburg Country Club. I arrived, beautiful country club, the lawns were impeccable, you know, it was pristine. I walked into the ballroom, like South Africans are, there was a lot of chatter and animated discussion. I remember seeing a lot of people in dark suits and with dark sunglasses on and thinking, gosh, something big is going down here. And I saw the governor of the Reserve Bank, Joel Marcus, who was governor at the time. But I had no idea about what else would follow. But in that ballroom, all of a sudden, there was complete silence. And you could hear a pin drop. And those big ballroom doors opened. And there, that big radiant smile appeared. And in walked Nelson Mandela. And that night was a life-changing moment for me. What I didn't realize was that there was going to be an auction. They auctioned off Mandela's suit. It wasn't any old suit. It was the suit he wore the day after he was released from prison. And of course, being super excited that today my childhood prayer had been answered and my dream had come true, I was determined to go home with that suit. What struck me about that suit was that it had a broken button. And I always wondered why a person of Mandela's stature and standing in the world would have a beautiful German, very refined, tailored suit with a broken button. And I'll never know the answer to that, but what it does remind me of is the fact that maybe it was a reminder that we all have broken buttons. Mandela had his broken buttons too. And despite his imperfections and South Africa being a broken system, he was absolutely fueled by his stubborn purpose that there is a radical new way to help transform ourselves, change our nations, and galvanize the world. So if we look at this radical new way, a radical new way to think, act, and lead in the world, it's helpful to understand what was going on in South Africa at the time.
It was one of the greatest struggles of our time, a time when thousands of innocent lives were taken through some of the most brutal measures known to man. It would take the bravery of many people to create a free and just system for all, and it would take thousands to bring down the system of apartheid. Even among all those brave people, all the heroes, all the victims, prisoners, and leaders, one man stood out because of his extraordinary generosity and wisdom in reaching out across all kinds of political and racial divides. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, Madiba. Born in Mvezo on the 18th of July in 1918, and 90 years later we cannot hear this name without recalling the amazing journey that is Madiba's life. From country boy to city lawyer, from resistance leader, political prisoner, peacemaker, president, and finally to tireless humanitarian. The man who served 27 years in prison because he dared to demand the right to be equal, to emerge free, not only of chains, but of anger and bitterness. How does one say thank you? How do we ensure that this legacy lives on? Because the example of Madiba's life must be carried on to all generations, so that they too can face the challenges in their lives with generosity of spirit, with integrity and courage. That has become the task of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, to promote Madiba's vision of justice and freedom. And today we celebrate with the publication of the official Nelson Mandela Foundation 90th birthday book. More than a book, it is a tribute to a truly remarkable man's life, to the spirit of humanity that shines through the darkest hours. This book will join together everyone who wants to say thank you to this great life and ensure that his vision lives on, to assure Madiba that through your support the legacy lives on. What greater way is there to say thank you and happy birthday, Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, for your extraordinary life and your gift to the world. Ukushiya ilifa lenqubeko.
So friends, that experience really helped me discover this radical new way. And if we look at some of the great leaders of our time, Dr. Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, Mother Teresa, there's a pattern. And what came through in Mandela's leadership and what touched us, not only was a gift for South Africa, but it was a gift for the world. Mandela's ability to exercise leadership in the way he did galvanized a collective bold action the world over. So internationally, what happened? 1959, consumer boycotts on the streets of London. There was an Olympic ban of the South African team. In 1970, the cricket tour of England was called off. South Africa was expelled from international athletics The United Nations passed a resolution, and also the Center developed a register of sports contacts with South Africa to put pressure on people who were still competing with and in and alongside South African athletes. There was the International Rugby World Cup ban, and of course we know how Mandela used rugby to change the hearts and minds of a nation. That was an incredible pain and loss for the apartheid government and their people, because rugby was really a national sport of identity, and so many other sports too. Not only that, there was a global anti-apartheid movement amongst academics across colleges and universities from Europe to Northern America, universities in the United States, Columbia, Spelman, Harvard, and many more. And if we think about Harvard specifically, there was a decade of protests. In 1978, Harvard Radcliffe students formed a Southern Africa community of solidarity. And 1,000 students showed up outside President Bok's residence to protest. Students erected black crosses on cold wintry days in Harvard Yard to simulate a cemetery. They built a shanty town, and students together with a Harvard professor went on a hunger strike. They also barricaded in Lowell House. The South African Consul General came to visit the Conservative Club at Harvard, and some students decided they wanted to give him an experience of what it was like to feel oppressed and not have your freedom. And he was barricaded in Lowell House. They also took charge of an administration building, and they also invaded, if you like, Harvard Corporation on Quincy Street. So there was a lot of pressure over a decade. And by the end of the 80s, Harvard finally divested of most of its interests in corporations operating in South Africa. It's quite ironic that the role that changed in terms of the feeling at the time, but it was really students, alumni, and professors at this amazing university that also stood up and took a stand against the apartheid government. What was remarkable was after this global movement that had really, the global movement was the final nail that went into the apartheid government's coffin. And it is the final thing when corporations disinvested from South Africa that persuaded the apartheid government to rethink their strategy and to start negotiations and discussions for a free and democratic South Africa. The world was on tenterhooks. We waited, we watched, and on February the 11th, 1990, Mandela walked out of Victor Verster prison in Franschhoek with his fist held high, shouting Mandela, which is power, and the people responded, Awetu, to the people. He stood proud, he stood, it was a very momentous day, and it was a day of celebration, not only for South Africans who wanted this day of freedom to come, but for people around the world. So what is this radical new way to think, act, and lead? You know, when we think about change, people often believe that people fear change. Actually, that is a myth. People don't fear change, they fear loss. If I had to share with any one of you, you've just won this great lottery and your life is about to change radically, very often that is a moment of joy. It is the loss that people fear. And Mandela said a couple of things around change. He said, when he began negotiating, and so many of you are in the world of negotiations, he said he began to understand that unless he transformed himself, he couldn't change other people. He also said that transforming himself was much harder than changing a nation. And change is hard, change is slow, and as Rosabeth Moss-Cantor, our professor from Harvard Business School, always says, it looks like a mighty mess in the middle. But what are these levers of change? The first is Mandela had a stubborn purpose. He was unrelenting in his pursuit for freedom and justice for all South Africans and the freedom of his people. The second is having an honest conversation with yourself. You know, Mandela, in his own words, said that he went to prison feeling angry and, you know, rebellious against a system where he suffered 1,000 slights, 1,000 indignities, and 1,000 unmemorable, you know, unremembered moments. But he also recognized that for every finger he had faced forward, pointing at the apartheid government and system, he had 3 fingers facing back. He took that time in prison to reflect, to introspect, and to redirect and change. And that is what Robert Keegan talks about, our stage 4 level of thinking, the self-authored mind, the ability to step outside of our tribe and take an objective look from outside in. The third lever of change was really a degree not only at the university, and by the way, Mandela received an honorary doctorate at Harvard on September the 18th, 1988. But it's not only those formal degrees that help us with that cognitive, technical mind. It's also a degree at the University of Life. And it's been able, and Keegan again refers to this, if we want to transcend to this higher level of thinking, we need to challenge ourselves with being uncomfortable. We need to challenge our current beliefs and perspectives. And part of that is to step into new and different and unknown environments. The research has shown us that 10% of the learning happens in the classroom with our case method. 20% happens through mentors and peers. And 70% happens at that University of Life. It was Mandela's willingness at Wits University, where he began to study his law degree, where he really engaged with Black and Brown people and established great friendships with people who really became part of the collective leadership in this global in this anti-apartheid movement. Ruth First, one of them, Fatima Mir, my former professor of sociology at Durban University, and of course many of the African Black leaders as well. But this degree at the University of Life gives us that immersive experiential learning that takes us out of that comfort zone and triggers these actions for change. The fourth is a supercognitive revolution. We've already referenced Keegan, who says most people live at level 3, which is a socialized mindset where they are defined by their tribe, they follow the rules of the tribe, and they aren't able to step out and think independently or have an independent sense of self. In addition to that, Mandela had more than IQ and EQ. He had 10 intelligence types. He had emotional intelligence, social intelligence. He had a cultural intelligence. He had a physical intelligence. He worked out every day in his prison cell, doing 100 push-ups on his fingers. And he knew how to show up with that radiant smile. He had a natural intelligence, an environmental intelligence. He grew his garden in prison, and he had a great relationship with the environment and an appreciation of the environment. He also had a spiritual intelligence, this knowingness that there's something much greater than ourselves beyond this physical world. It's also what shaped and helped him with his physical intelligence to keep his prison warders close, in and out of prison, and invite them to his presidential inauguration. He had a Mandela mindset. What is that mindset? It is one of growth. It's one of understanding that we make mistakes, we err, we learn, we grow. It's a mindset of adaptability that we need. If we want to grow, we need to adapt and transform. And he had a mindset of possibility. He took himself out of those depths of despair during many moments in prison and took himself to a level of hope, which we call inspiration and aspiration, and possibility, which is perspiration. He developed a plan of possibility. So that mindset that takes us, of teachability, adaptability, and possibility was a conscious process, not only of one's thoughts and what one fills one's mind with and how one inspires and aspires daily, but a possibility plan. He also had a fortified moral courage. He said about courage that courage is not the absence of fear, it's the triumph over it. And he also said, don't judge me by my successes, judge me by how many times I fall down and get back up. And fortified moral courage, within the blueprint, we have different levers and support systems that can help us fortify our moral courage. A clarity of our values, what's negotiable, what isn't. That rugged resilience, we need to stand up more than we sit down. A sense of transparent trust and naked accountability, even when subpoenaed by a high court in Pretoria, when he was not obliged technically to go to court in front of a conservative white Afrikaans judge. He told his legal advisors, I need to do this to show the people of South Africa that the Constitution is sacred. No person, no president is above the law. He knew that he would lose in the High Court, but he had faith in the Constitutional Court that they would ultimately win, and they did. It's about that daily discipline, and it's also about that stubborn purpose that fuels us when we're feeling low, when we're feeling in despair, and we think, how do we continue? How do we get this done? It is about collective, bold action. You know, friends, leadership is not a solo sport. It is not about me, myself, and I. We have a saying in Africa, it takes a village. And it was only through his ability to transform himself that he could change the nation, but also galvanize the world in this collective, bold action. And lastly, but very significantly, it's Ubuntu. Ubuntu is an ancient African word. It is a spiritual, a cultural, and philosophical concept that appreciates and respects the interconnectedness of our humanity. It is one race, one human race, one humanity, and we have a shared destiny. That is what emboldened Mandela to understand that a victory for one is a victory for all, that you cannot sustain success by winning a war and leaving the other side devastated and decimated. So if we listen to Mandela's expression of the first lever of change, a stubborn purpose, what he cared so deeply about, what got him up in the morning, what gave him meaning in his life, here is a recording of what he said when he decided to defend himself at his Rivonia trial in 1964. In fact, it wasn't a defense within the apartheid system. It was an expression of what Mandela said was that he could not be tried by a system that was so unjust. It was an expression of his ideals, of what he stood for, what he fought for, and his dreams for a new South Africa.
I have dedicated my life to this struggle of the African people. I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons will live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an idea for which I hope to live for and to see realized. But my Lord, if it needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die.
So my invitation to you today is to think about what is that thing you care so deeply about. Take a moment, write it down. Is it climate? Is it a fight for democracy? Is it AI? Is it war and bringing peace? If we have a look very briefly at yesterday's leadership paradigm versus the future of leadership, and what we discovered, not only from Mandela in South Africa, but how this pattern was replicated and lived in the lives of Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. Martin Luther King as well. The old paradigm is about power. The new paradigm is about practice. It's about action. We're not called leaders. We exercise leadership. It's about shifting from this magnetic view of leadership being charismatic to the fact that leaders exercising leadership requires us to be purpose-driven and purpose-led. It's a country focus. We still breed this national identity, which, like that, baseball competition in Ubuntu, that competition is not a bad thing. But if you look at the global threats, we have threats and challenges that transcend our national borders. We're living in an age and a stage where national thinking and populist nationalism cannot meet the big global issues of this time. It's beyond IQ and EQ. It's about 10 multiple intelligences. It's a different mindset of winning at all costs versus creating this win-win. It's the technical challenge. Steve Biko once said that the great powers of the world have done wonders in giving the world a military and an industrial look. And the world has been incredibly successful in terms of the industrial revolution, the militarization, the technology revolution, in terms of those technical issues. But today, so many more of the challenges are technical and adaptive. So the leadership of the future is about technical and adaptive challenge, changing the heads and the hearts and the minds of all stakeholders. It's the fixed mindset versus growth, change, and possibility, and a hierarchy versus the collective structure. The ANC was a collective leadership body. Mandela was the icon. He was the kind of global symbol. But all of those decisions happened in consultation, in prison, in and out of prison. It's the expert resume versus top headhunters, people like myself that ran one of the top international executive search firms when assessing leadership. Yes, you need the technical skills. They are important. But most importantly, it's about your purpose, your character, and the impact you can and are willing to make. We need to shift out of this quarterly short-term results into sustainable impact and triple bottom line. It's not only about the numbers, it's about society and the environment too. And it's a difference between the shareholder value, which is important, but it's about creating shared value. It's delivering to all of our stakeholders who are engaged in our corporations, our organizations. And from an educational point of view, it is taking us beyond the classroom and giving us that experiential learning. It's one tribe versus one nation, which is so much of the thinking today and the identity today, to understanding that leadership of the future is about understanding Ubuntu. It is one race, one world. We're all interconnected with a common humanity and a shared destiny. So what is the role you can play? The first thing, and this is one simple step, identify, distill, and commit to your stubborn purpose. Sign a commitment to it, share it with your friends, discuss it with your colleagues, and work out what that purpose is for you and for the organization you're in, and align the two. Yes, there is a pledge for those of you who care about the world, who care about the state of conflict in the world and what the world needs now. When we commit to a pledge, it often holds us. There is something powerful about writing it. It's a bit like signing a document, whether it be a a contract or a marriage document, you know, contract or whatever. There is a different level of commitment. Donna already mentioned, we have co-founded a global Mandela leadership movement for change. Our collective purpose is to transform the leadership crisis worldwide, to remind an older generation like myself and to empower and inspire the next. And to this end, I've interviewed 100 change makers around the world, including the wonderful Donna Hicks. These are change makers who are creating impact, sustainable impact and change. And they include people like Harvard's former president, Larry Backhaar, Donna, I've mentioned, the former vice chancellor of Cambridge University, Lord Alec Brewers, the head of the World Trade Organization, Dr. Nkosi, chairman and CEOs of listed companies from London to New York to Johannesburg. I could carry on. But it's join the moment, listen to these people. They all have a shared Mandela moment, and they all share their transformational story of what they went through in helping them to think, act, and lead like Mandela today. There is a pre-order opportunity for the book Mandela's Leadership Blueprint. It will be followed by a workbook to help people understand what is it, and with practical experiences about, you know, exercises to develop those skills within yourself. And then, you know, the way one can participate in about colleges and universities worldwide. We already have 5 universities, including Stanford, a top business school in Ireland and South Africa, you know, United World College, etc., who want to bring in this blueprint to help empower and inspire the next generation. We're also looking at sourcing and raising funds to do 10 Mandela masterclasses online as part of the package. And we have an international movie maker who's one of our co-founders. He's won awards all over the world, who is looking at turning the book into a documentary, From History to Hope. Because if we look at the level of anxiety and concern in the world today, we need this message of hope. This is a history cheat sheet that helps us know that the world has done it before and the world can do it again. So friends, in closing, I'd like to circle back to where we began. Where are we in the world today? What is this radical new way, these 7 levers of change, the Nelson Mandela way? And what role is it that you can play? And if we think about it, Mandela's story is an empirical case of hope. It's not only a victory for Mandela, it was South Africa's triumph, but it's also a global victory. And I know that taking you going through this process of evolution and transformation, you too, armed with Mandela's leadership blueprint, can radically change the way you think, act, and lead. And, you know, there is the final words I'd love to leave with you before we handle some Q&A are modified lyrics borrowed from one of my favorite songs sung by Whitney Houston called One Moment in Time. And just part of it, and I'll share these with you. People want just one moment in time to be more than they thought they could be. When all of my dreams is a heartbeat away and the answers are all up to me. Folks, this is that one moment in time when we are racing with destiny. And those dreams and ideals for a reimagined world can be part of your legacy. I thank you. Bless you, and Ngiyabonga.
Oh, Anne, thanks so much. Thanks so much. There's so much to be inspired by in your presentation, and you're just doing remarkable work, and I want to thank you. This has been wonderful. Now we have just a couple of questions that I'd like to see if we can. We don't have that much time, but let's see if we can go from the beginning here. Could you say, this is from Laura Herrera, could you say that the leadership method that Nelson Mandela proposed for years can also govern organizations such as political groups or struggles such as religious freedom? Can that be transferred?
That's a great question. And Absolutely, sir. The principles of leadership. And, so many people who are part of our movement, Donna, have said that Mandela's leadership lives right across the ages, but it also transcends all sectors. So the quick answer is yes. In the book, there is a section in the book on how corporate chiefs in the corporate world think, act, and lead like Mandela today. There are corporations like Unilever and even Walmart and how they responded to Hurricane Katrina, who are taking this radical new approach, being purpose-led. But coming back to religious organizations, absolutely. And by the way, on the point of religion, Mandela once said that religion is a private conversation between an individual and their elected higher power or not. He never discussed religion. He was raised in the Methodist Church, but he also had he was really led, and it was a very personal conversation for him. But yes, absolutely. And we know how religion can divide people. We know the religious wars that have gone on in the world. And absolutely, there is a way. And by the way, one of the people on the podcast, which is on my website, and also if you sign up for the podcast, there's a blog, there's YouTube and the podcast platform, is the former global president of the United Church of Christ. And he actually talks about Mandela's leadership and how through that leadership, he has transcended across religions to work with people from other faiths and religions in other parts of the world.
Yeah, well, that's really hopeful. Thank you, Anne. This is from Sarza Yasmin, and the question is, thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. My question is about people. What strategies and processes did Mandela use to galvanize people into action for sustainable reforms in South Africa? I am Bangladeshi, and we had an uprising and ousted an autocratic regime. How can the interim government of Bangladesh use leadership lessons from South Africa to ensure justice and start working on processes of reform and reconstruction?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I want to remind people that what Mandela said about change is that when he began negotiating with the other side, he realized that until he changed himself, he couldn't change others. So the whole Mandela blueprint is about starting with self. It's about your own stubborn purpose. It's about having an honest conversation with yourself and focused on the three fingers facing backwards. And in terms of that process, he went through that introspection, redirection, reflection that Keegan talks to us about, which enables us to get to a level 4 of thinking where we're not just mentally tied up blindly, if you like, in the thinking around our tribe and our tribe only. That thinking and that process of reflection, introspection helps us step out of that and look objectively at our tribe. And the more we do that, and the more we engage at the University of Life and meet and greet, and I have no doubt, Donna, that the fact that my late mother took me to poor white Afrikaans homes to understand their fear in terms of their loss of employment, but also took me to rural mission hospitals, and stepping into these different environments opened up my mind to these multiple experiences and different perspectives. So that is part of the strategy. Those are part of the levers of change. It's a mental process. It's a research process. It's an experiential process. It's an honest conversation, have a look in the mirror process.
You know, it's a really tricky one for people, I think, to grasp the concept of one race and one world. And I think that's one of the gifts that he taught us, that we are a human race. We are members, all of us, of the human species. And if we take that unit of analysis by looking at who are we as a species, that, you know, it's important to understand our differences. Without a doubt, it's important to understand that. And yet at the same time, the paradox here is, yeah, but we also have to understand that we're all the same. You know, that one race, one world, the idea. So those paradoxes is what Bob Keegan was so brilliant at pointing out, and how difficult that is to grasp. But that's why there aren't very many people at stage 5. And
Yeah, but the other thing I also want to say, Donna, you know, for people who don't necessarily have the financial or economic means to travel the world, this is one of the gifts of technology, that technology can bring the world to us. So through technology, we can get to explore. I know that traveling the world has been my university of life. And even if you don't have the means to do that, bring the world to you, use technology. You know, one of the things I used to do in South Africa I used to do the last lecture every year at the top business school MBA class, their commemoration lecture. And I'd say, how many of you think that you're agents of change? Most of the class would put up their hands. And then I would say, well, how many of you invited, you know, people of different race and color to your last birthday party? The class was fairly silent. How many people of you had a multicultural and multiracial year-end Christmas party when you celebrated? A handful. Yeah. These are simple, practical ways. And what I say to people, it takes just one bold step at a time. It's one bold step for you, but as you evolve together, it becomes a giant step for humanity.
Okay, one last question, and I have to ask you to be brief in answering this because sure. I need to turn this over to our colleague Nicole. But here's this is from Ahmed Omar. I would like to thank I'd like to thank both Anne's great work in this exceptional book. My questions are: how can you link or relate radical movement in South Africa with what's happening in Gaza, Sudan, Ukraine? How can you predict the future of imperialism in the case of war between Russia and Ukraine? What does that mean for Mandela? Wait a minute. What does it mean for Mandela, for Russia and Ukraine leadership, both?
Yeah. Well, those are big questions, but
yeah, they're big.
Okay. What I do know is that Mandela was a great friend of Jewish people. He had a very close relationship with Jewish people in South Africa. He went to bar mitzvahs. Equally, he stood out against the right for Palestinian people to exercise their leadership rights and have expressed their self-determination. So again, it's this paradox. He had this love and gratitude with people from Israel and with people from Palestine. He lived by his values. That's why those clear, solid values in terms of fortified moral courage are so critical. He had clear boundaries around his principles, his values, and a sense of the kind of world he wanted to live in. So I believe that and Mandela did say this, he spoke out against the right of Palestinians. He would speak out against Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And he would call on all powers in the world to come together and not turn the victim into the victimizer, because that is one of the big lessons of South Africa. You know, with blacks being a majority, they could easily have become the next oppressor. Ubuntu steers us away from that. I'm going to stop there.
All right. Thank you so much, Anne. I can't even grasp it. I need some time to process everything you said. It was such a treasure having you here with us. And thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Nicole Bryant now.
Thank you so much, Donna, and thank you, Anne, and thank you to all of our participants who have been so engaged throughout the course of today's session. We really appreciate it. This was very inspiring and truly a call to action for all of us going forward. I wanted to just briefly preview some of the upcoming events that we have in this month of October, which we've just now joined. Our next Kelman Seminar will be next week on October 10th. With two mediators who worked deeply on Mozambique, talking about lessons for mediation in international contexts. And then former Ambassador Stuart Eisenstadt at the end of October will be back to preview his latest book. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us today, and we're very honored by your presence. And we look forward to seeing everyone again at either another PON Live event or perhaps at one of our training sessions here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, or online. Take care, everyone, and be well.